Let me throw something at you. So right now we live in I've heard some people describe it as victim culture, right? I've spoken a lot about child sexual abuse, for example, and how often people thought I would jump onto certain movements, a Me Too movement or otherwise, when a lot of them were extremely, they had some kernels of truth in it, but a lot of them were poorly done, both within the Jewish community and globally. So looking at that as a problem on the world stage, right, where people, certainly we have to tell our story, right, which is one aspect of it, but then getting stuck with and identifying in that story and say, I am forever a victim of whatever it was that happened to me, or whatever it was that happened to you, or whatever it was that happened to us collectively. That maybe what you're saying, or maybe one way it could be said, is that the Jewish people have not resolved our own trauma surrounding the Holocaust. And maybe many of us are still stuck in the victim culture of that. And as a byproduct of that, the world on a global stage is magnifying that more and more and saying, I'm a victim of this, I'm a victim of that. And then more and more, the louder the victim, almost the more respect we give them when we're saying, no, hey, that's not the message. The message is and always will be personal responsibility, and finding those parts in that story that could be changed next time or could be learned from. In other words, my question is it a stretch based on your worldview to say that so much of the culture, the victim culture that we see today, may be because Jews have not gotten over their own victimhood? We have not gotten over our own victimhood related to the Holocaust.
I don't think the reason for why everyone sees themselves as victims is because necessarily the Jews see themselves as victims. But I would say that the Jewish people, if they took on this responsibility of empowering the world and getting the world to wake up from the problems that the way things are seen, whether it's like caring only about materialism and individuality rather than the collective inhumanity of this world, then we have a responsibility to do something we're not. Let me give you an example. If someone chooses to be a doctor, right, it's their choice. It doesn't make them a good person or a bad person. They chose to be a doctor. And there's a flight that goes off, and there's a person, having a heart attack on the flight. And it just happens that there's a doctor who's a cardiologist. He's trained in being able to do something. And as the person is having a heart attack, the doctor looks at that person and says, I'm not going to do anything. It's not the doctor that killed the patient, right, but the families and the witnesses will definitely externalize their pain and their trauma on that doctor, saying, you could have saved my family and you didn't. So you're going to be the person that I'm going to blame and take out my pain on.
Yes, sure. I'm not blaming anyone. What I'm saying is
that's why
empowering.
Yeah.
But in this same example, do you think that we can do something about it in that way?
Yes.
And that it would change something downstream.
Absolutely.
In the culture?
Absolutely, we can do something. If it's our responsibility to. And if we don't fulfill that responsibility, we will always get rejected for not doing so. I'm not saying this to justify anything. I'm saying it to understand the equation and the algorithm that exists within this universe in order to put in the right variables and to get the right outcome. My goal is for us to get us to the right outcome.
Right. What I'm interested in is what's so interesting is that you've been able to do it on a story of something that happened to you at 7 years old, right? When obviously it's victimless. I mean, how can you, it's not victimless. Obviously it's faultless to a 7-year-old. What could a 7-year-old have possibly done? And what could a 7-year-old possibly have had a responsibility to do prior to that time? But still in all, with all of those potential reasons to not take personal responsibility, you still found a way to look at that story and say, hey, there's a message here for us. We are not doing enough collectively in order to prevent these things. We're not unified enough.
What's interesting is that what my mom was wearing, her shirt, it was a shirt that she bought in Sfat that said emet, truth. And so the emet from him was shown, and when he showed his emet, it revealed my emet, my truth.
And the truth from him was? The
truth for him was that he had this huge hatred towards the Jewish people, and that was just like, revealed. I'm sure he had met other Jews before, but it was almost as seeing that word that made it revealed. And when I saw that, that made it revealed to me. And there's many characters of Jewish history that went through similar situations, right? Moses witnesses a slave master beating a Jewish slave, and that is his like epiphany, his wake-up call that, he can't just stand there anymore and he has to do something about it. Or Herzl, right, who's a journalist who's very assimilated, even had like theories that we should convert to Catholicism in order to no longer be persecuted, goes to the Dreyfus trials in France, witnesses this public condemnation of a Jew just for being Jewish when the person wasn't even guilty, and that makes that person wake up.
Right.
Sometimes we have to go through that to wake up. The question is, if that's plan B, right? That we have to go through anti-Semitism to wake us up, to spark us back to direction, that we have to go through this moment
But
like
Hitler
this.
did that specifically, right? He went back 3 generations.
Yeah, but I'm saying if
He was very specific in targeting Jews that even didn't identify as
for
Jews.
him, it's all Jews. Like
Right.
he tried to go to Afghanistan to find lost tribes to kill them as
And
well.
going back several generations.
Right.
And
He wanted to eradicate
was
anything.
not assimilated or not assimilated. It was,
So I'm saying
you're a
that
Jew.
if anti-Semitism comes when the Jews assimilate, forget their purpose, and hate each other and are divided and so on, right? And then once we go through that, it always brings us back to a generation right after that is aware of who they are, that takes action, that becomes of themselves. If anti-Semitism is plan B, what is plan A? What is plan A that we no longer have to go through that in order to see the right way?
But despite the fact that we did that, you're still saying that we didn't heal the trauma of it.
No, we have not held the trauma from the Holocaust. I mean, people make that their identity. The Holocaust is their identity of being Jewish. It's like everything of being Jewish, and when you talk about like, okay, well, what did we get wrong before the Holocaust? We didn't create the Holocaust, but let's learn from the past to make sure it's not going to happen again, right? If someone's going to come into my house and, steal my things and do something like that, chas
They're a
v'shalom,
bad guy, but
right?
lock the
But
door.
like next time you want to know that I'm going to learn from that mistake. Like, okay, it wasn't my fault, but I didn't really have a good security system. I didn't have a fence. I didn't have cameras. I didn't have, those things that you would have, that now I realize those are things that I left open that lets the bad person that is responsible for the trauma. But because there are bad people out there, we have to prepare ourselves. We're not living in a world with only good. We're living in a world with bad. And if you are good, then you have to be prepared for the bad in order to prevent it from actually achieving what it wants to do.
So your message is that if someone breaks into your home, lock the door. But if they get through anyway, break their knees.
Yes, and next time make sure that they can't even get down the block.